Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first conversation with Crossover, and I'd like to welcome Veronica Fernandez from Visa. Hi, Veronica. How are you today?
Hey Anthony, good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you on. You're our first kind of like cards and BaaS related conversation, so welcome aboard.
Thank you. Yes. Did you survive Halloween? I know thankfully we didn't do this yesterday, I guess.
Yeah, we would have had something interesting on. I don't know what I would have went as, but perhaps just like some card executive trying to make it through, maybe. But
There you go.
let's start this off. Just for everyone, this is a conversation we'd like to have. Talk a little bit about what's going on, get to know Veronica, get to know what she's working on and what Visa's looking at, and get excited about, I think, a great space that's shown a lot of growth. So why don't we start first, Veronica? Tell us about yourself, like, a little bit about how'd you get into payments, you know?
Yeah, it's always kind of a daunting question, isn't it? Tell us about yourself. But yeah, so a little bit about me personally. I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and but I've been in the States for many years. I'm in the Bay Area. And have been for the last maybe 12 or 13 years. So my family is here. I've got a 10-year-old daughter who was very excited about Halloween yesterday. But how I got into payments, I've been at Visa for almost 17 years now. I think I started in 2007, right before we IPO'd, which was interesting. So very different place now. But I came from a super regional bank, so I was living in Minneapolis, and was working for a super regional bank there. And then I made the jump to Visa, and when I made the jump, I came over in the commercial space. So as a matter of fact, in the B2B space, I was selling corporate and purchasing cards and the early days of payables, I would say, at this super regional bank. And so I came over to do commercial for Visa and did that for about a year. And then, as things do, things always change. And so, yeah, jumped around a lot. So I worked in strategic partnerships, or what was then like the early days of strategic partnerships. At that time, there really weren't any fintechs. So strategic partners were they kind of sat outside. We managed our traditional financial institution players. We managed our merchants and our acquirer processors. But it was, the companies that kind of sat outside of that. So it was like a MoneyGram or a Western Union, like the early days again of money movers. And then I made the jump to consumer prepaid during the years of Durbin, which was a lot of fun. We used to call it kind of the Wild West of prepaid, which I think you and I crossed paths at that time. And then I really got into what I would call like our true like strategic partners now, fintech. I was managing, before this role, I was managing a team that managed our customer card on file merchants. So, think about, the rideshare companies or companies that you might get, your streaming from. So anyone that, has a customer card on file. Which was great because it kind of teed me up for what I came into now. So I've been managing North America for VCS, for Visa Commercial Solutions. We use a lot of acronyms at Visa for the last 3 years. And so what that means, Visa Commercial Solutions is really about small business, our middle market, large corporate space, our government solutions team, and our B2B fintech partnerships team. So it kind of spans the gamut. But my previous role in merchant really kind of prepped me for what's happening now in B2B, which, we all talk about the consumerization of B2B and everyone wanting that Uber-like experience. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me, and how I got into B2B payments.
No, it's fantastic. It's interesting. We all share, if you talk to people who have been in payments like lifers, I consider us lifers. I think once you go past like 10,
Yes.
15 years, you're kind of a lifer. It's interesting because, you do get that diversified most of the time, diversified background. Folks in acquiring, they tend to stay in acquiring, but they kind of move around a little bit in terms of
Yeah.
different things. Issuing is the same thing. And it's like, I think we have similar paths. I think we touched on almost anything and everything. So it's great to talk to someone like you who's kind of had that experience, and especially coming from the Visa side. And I know, like, we just were at Money 2020, right? Which is I call it the Super
Yes.
Bowl of payments. It's everyone's there.
Was.
What did you think? I mean, I know that every year there's always kind of trends and different, things that we talk about. What did you
Yeah.
see at the show? And, what are you seeing, across, maybe just not even just in commercial, but in general across the industry?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I'd love to hear the same from you, but maybe just to take it. Well, first and foremost, I thought, they said that there were less attendees at Money 2020 this year, but it certainly didn't feel like that to me.
Agreed.
I actually thought it felt crazier than last year, but maybe that was just because of, all the meetings and the folks
Yeah.
that I would bump into in the hallway. But I thought there was a lot of excitement, a lot of excitement. There's still a ton of opportunity. I mean, if you think about B2B, you just think about, a lot of times people ask us like, well, are you worried about your competition? And it's like, well, hang on. Yeah, I'm worried about checks. I, I
Yes.
am,
Yeah.
I am still worried that like there are still so many checks in the ecosystem, and I know people hate that word ecosystem, but like there are so many
Yeah.
checks. There's so much, but what that means is there's so much opportunity, right? And and so, a lot of themes I heard, certainly around digital. I think a lot of the financial institutions are thinking about modernization and modernizing their tech stacks, because of what they're seeing in the fintech space, and those pressures and that consumerization of B2B, where CFOs, treasurers are getting younger, and that we're all expecting the same experience, right? When we want that DoorDash, that Uber
Yeah.
experience in our everyday professional lives. A lot of discussion around small business. I actually sat on a panel to talk a little bit about small business with Bill and Extend and BCG. And, it's just great to think through, like, how can we really address the needs of small business? I don't think that there's one provider out there that's really kind of cracked the nut or cracked the code. It's still so hard for small businesses to, pay and get paid,
Yeah.
and actually, drive a successful small business. So a lot of opportunity there. Cross-border, there's a lot of discussion around cross-border. And yeah, I mean, there's so much, but one thing I did hear was, obviously, I think we all know that like FY24 is probably going to be a tough year, from a macroeconomic environment, but I definitely still felt a lot of momentum and excitement and the opportunity. But how about you?
No, I mean, I think it was similar. I think, one of the things I did notice, there was a lot of focus on compliance tech. I don't think I've ever gotten so many emails and inquiries to have meetings.
Yes.
And I think, like, look, I think that that's a good thing. I do think that there's definitely
Yes.
room for automation using AI. So there's some really, great solutions out there. And I thought that was fascinating. And again, ties across whether it's consumer or commercial, it's definitely going to be needed, right? As we look at growth. I agree with you. There's still a lot of opportunity. I mean, the conversations we've had, there's a lot of creative and innovative, players out there really looking to do something which is exciting. Certainly, we had no shortage of meetings, right? There definitely
Yeah.
was not, which is a good sign. I do think, though, definitely, from a macro, climate, if you will, macro environment, there are concerns, right? There are a lot of,
Yeah.
high interest rates, and we'll get into that, conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because as you talk about small businesses, nothing is worse, right, than trying to borrow money and trying to, get your business going when things are so expensive, right? So how do you work around that? I think checks come up. It's interesting, both on the commercial and consumer side. It's one of the, I've been fighting that battle as well as you, like, for decades now, I feel. And it's interesting, it's 2023 and we're still talking about checks. But I do, like, I think, like, again, I think there is some optimism. We should be optimistic. Fintech
Yes.
isn't dead. It's there. I think it's going to change. It's going to focus somewhere else. We've seen this before, but it's a necessity. Payments is a necessity in our industry,
Yeah.
in our life. And so I do think, no matter what, we'll be around, right?
We will. We
Yeah,
will.
yeah,
A
yeah,
100%. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Like, the macroeconomic environment kind of ebbs and flows, right? And
yeah,
what that ends up generating is, now there's probably a lot of M&A opportunity out there for folks, whether it's a financial institution or a larger, third party enabler, to acquire some good technology, right?
yeah,
And so, like, partnerships is really important. I mean, I talk about partnerships a lot,
mhm,
whether it's with Visa or whether it's with other partners. It's how can you drive value and growth for your own customer set, while at the same time, partnering with an entity that can make your value proposition additive, to what you have today. So
yeah,
yeah. And then, and just touching on, I guess, riffing on your point, I think fraud and risk are also huge. Fraud, risk, compliance. I agree with you. A lot of great technology out there, and solutions. And then, we didn't talk about, I this phrase of embedded payments, which
yes,
I
yeah.
always say, it's such a buzzword now. Like,
It is.
I kind of
It's
feel
what the,
like
it's what
we've
the
been
kid it's what the kids are saying,
it's what yeah, it is. Yes, the kids, exactly.
Yeah,
But it's like we've been taught, we've been embedding payments for a
yeah,
long time, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
just, now it definitely seems like a hot topic, and again, just presents more opportunity.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to, like, stay on that topic because it is interesting to me, right? Like, you have fintechs that are, their business is built on payments, right? They're a card company, they're doing lending. But then there's, like, you mentioned Uber, there's Apple, there's others, right? Who are, you argue that's kind of your embedded finance, embedded,
Yeah.
whatever you want, payments. What are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you see that going? Have you seen, with Visa, some traction there to get everyone, kind of excited, if you will, right? That there's a whole bunch of opportunity with non-payment companies that really want to get payments done, but they have to do it in a different way, right? Than traditional.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I mean, I think it was, McKinsey put out their global payment study, and, they talked about kind of that progression. We started with paper, then we have plastic, and then it was all about
Mhm.
accounts. And now they talk about kind of decoupled, right? Meaning,
Mhm.
we're decoupling, like, the pan and the account from, the paper, the plastic, from the actual payment, right? Like the digital experience.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we're seeing in embedded payments. Number one, we've allowed it, the payments ecosystem has allowed for that to happen with things like virtual cards and APIs, right? I
Mhm.
mean, without an API, we really couldn't have embedded payments. And we're seeing it across kind of the spectrum of certainly the businesses that I manage. So, small business, I mean, you're seeing new and different virtual use cases every day as it relates to embedded payments. And then you're seeing opportunity with, ERPs, right?
Mhm.
Enterprise
Yeah.
resource planning, type, solutions. And then the other interesting piece is we're actually seeing a lot of, ISVs or PayFacs,
Mhm.
right, which are thinking differently about embedding payments. And I'm not maybe talking about the traditional ones. We all know of, like, the traditional large PayFacs, like an Intuit or a Block. right? But there are actually verticalized ISVs or PayFacs that we're starting to see, that are looking to service both small business and then kind of that emerging middle market company, by enabling, like, I can pay and I can get paid, and I can bring together all of these additional solutions, and I can do it seamlessly, in, the actual application that I'm providing to you. So I think we're just going to see more and more of embedded payments, which, is going to present an opportunity for all of us. I don't know if there's anything I missed, or anything that you all see, as an issuer.
No, I mean, we're seeing the same thing. I think there's definitely been, how do you again take accounts in our side, like take accounts, whatever it is, kind of embed it, so to speak, into like that whole like life cycle or whatever you want to call it, right? Adoption curve. I think there's definitely different use cases that are coming about. B2B is certainly seeing like a much, more focus. It was always on the consumer side. We were talking about like checkouts and how do we get money dispersed into accounts. I kind of see somewhat similar, right? So, you're a business, you're acquiring funds. Where's the money used to go? So you just be deposited straight into some bank account that you designate. Well, now, you can have a debit account or a checking, like a credit card or something, a secured card that's tied to that, right? So there's definitely more creativity there. But I also think it's actually helpful to the business, right? Because they're able to use a tool with the money that they have or going to have, right, based on their revenue, right? So I do think
Yeah.
those things are definitely picking up steam, and I think
Yeah,
it's going to be very
100%.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the things we haven't talked about is like tokens and tokenization. I talked about this a little bit
Yeah.
in a session at Money 2020, just about kind of the connected car, with Car IQ.
Yeah.
But what I mean by tokens is, anything can really be a payment device these days, right? And so, and I think you're gonna continue to see more of that, and that will start to merge with this whole embedded payments, ideology as well. Because at the end of the day, it's not about a PAN anymore. It's not about
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
16-digit account. It really is about a token, and a token could be my irises. A token could be a car. A token could be anything. Now, the good news, though, for all of us is that, there has to be like a bank account and some sort of, payment device in order to like push
Yeah.
payments and receive them. But again, like it's just the opportunity that's out there. Yeah.
Well, I would say, as a car guy, you probably can see there's a book behind me. I am fascinated, and I think it's Tesla, for example, right? To give them credit, if you think about the experience there, when I go charge, it knows where I am. It takes it out of the wallet, right? You mentioned
Oh,
Car
yeah.
IQ. I think all those things are just innovations in our life that you think about. Do I really need it? I could pull, but it's like it ties into an experience, right? To your point, that I don't have to pull out a card, a physical card anymore. My
That's
car is
right.
my card, whatever is my card, like you said, my heartbeat, whatever it might be. I mean, these are the things that are there. And that leads me kind of like to what Visa, what I've seen Visa do, I think it's been, a while now, is kind of shift your focus on being a card company to be kind of like the network of networks, right? You all have, there's, through various partnerships, acquisitions, you've kind of changed the scope of where Visa is. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that, right? Because I do think that a lot of it ties to what you just said, but love to hear, from your perspective, where is Visa going with this, and what is Visa seeing, in terms of that?
Yeah, I think what we realize is, yes, we do use that term network of networks quite a bit, and I know others do as well. But I truly believe, in it, because we are enabling interoperability to a certain extent. So we're not just thinking about the card anymore. It's really about, what are all of the different pain points, right? For a business, for a consumer, when they do whatever it is that they need to do, whether it's online or in store, and then they decide to pay. And so just wanting to enable that to be as seamless as possible. And when we think about network of networks, we think of, our perspective on partnerships. We're trying to make it easier to work with a large network like Visa. We have programs like our FinTech Fast Track program where, we basically help and operationalize, here's how you can work together with Visa through our FinTech Fast Track program, pricing, et cetera. So we're trying to make it easier. And then, as we think about partnerships, we bring companies together. So in other words, I always talk about like our partners of partners, right? So we can bring together fintechs, we can bring together those financial institution partners, and it's not about them competing. It's about how do you put your solutions together to make an even better solution. And I know, Cross River is in the middle of that as well, right? So, we know that financial institutions want that speed to market. We know that they want that fintech like tech experience, and marrying them with partners in the fintech space is, one of the things that we do best, again, whether that's on the consumer side or on the B2B side. And then lastly, I would say, when we think about commercial and money movement, it's really about, even some of the acquisitions that we've made, like a currency cloud, to extend what we can do from an FX perspective, or a Tink, in terms of how we can think about open banking, whether that's in the consumer space, in the small business space, and beyond. So, that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how we think about network of networks. We really just want to lift all boats.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I think, what you said, really resonates with me because I've worked in different areas, right? I've worked at a network, I worked at a bank, I've worked at, kind of like a program manager / processor. And, what's important for everyone to understand, right? Everyone has equal importance. And so, and Visa recognized that, and I think we do as well. Like, when we look at our partnerships, we look across and we tell our clients, you can't just focus on one because every one of us has to bring something to the table that's critical for you to succeed. And I think and I think the more that we can bring each of us to the table to help those clients move forward, I think it just makes things easier, right? Because otherwise they seek solutions on their own. They're going out there, and what that does is just, causes longer onboarding time, causes, issues later on. So I do think and appreciate kind of like that partnership aspect, and definitely, what Visa is doing there. I want to shift, not totally, but I want to get into the, your love affair with business, right? You live it every day. I want to start talking about B2B, right? And get a sense of how do you see B2B, and in particular, let's talk a little bit about kind of like where we are. I mean, we talked earlier about checks, and this is another thing about my life mission. I thought by now, I mean, did you think by now we would still have almost 3 billion checks in the system? I mean, let's be honest.
I mean, sadly, no, but they're still there. I still have a checkbook at home. I don't use it very often, but it's still there. Yeah.
It's still there. Yeah. Yeah. But I'd love to hear kind of like, let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the environment and what you're working on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think there's a more exciting time for B2B. I really don't. I think, just the momentum that we've seen in the last couple of years, especially, I would say the last 2 to 5 years, like especially in some of the areas within fintech that's really been driving commercial money movement. You talked about checks. Yes, there's still. I wrote an article with someone on our Visa consulting and analytics team, and to be honest, he probably wrote most of that article. But it was about, and we put that on our Visa Navigate site. But it was about checks in the U.S. representing 11 trillion in dollars, right? So we talk about almost 3 billion checks. That's like 11 trillion. So just like wrap your head around that. So the opportunity is there. the opportunity is also there to disrupt and um, make make the experience more seamless. And maybe what I can do is start with small business, because yes, I have a love affair with commercial and money movement, but I really have a love affair with small business. So, there are, I think the latest count was like 33 million small businesses in the US. They make up 47% of US GDP. But we really haven't solved the pain points for small business, right? Whether it's to pay or to get paid. They don't have a lot of time. And so, they really want a one-stop shop. And I don't know that there's a perfect one-stop shop out there. So there's opportunity there. We've seen the rise of fintechs in the B2B space, as I know you have. The likes of, Divvy or now Bill, Ramp, others, and those types of companies really are driving like that digital seamless user experience, those requirements, and we're seeing them drive up market. So those companies started kind of in the VC space, small business, but as those companies have grown, they're focusing on the middle market now, right? And so that in turn is like putting pressure on some of the financial institutions to really have a more robust middle market offering. So we're seeing that as well. And then if I think about like the large corporate space, we're seeing a need, for selling in like a more fulsome suite of products that address many different pain points. So again, going in and not just talking about cards, really talking about all forms of payment, as well as things like cross-border solutions and differentiation through verticals like a construction or a fleet or a healthcare or a government. And then I guess what I would say last but not least is, acceptance, right? We haven't talked about acceptance. Like acceptance continues to be an area where we all need to continue to move the needle. I know Visa as a network is doing, a lot of things there. But we got to crack that code too, if we really want to attack those, the 11 trillion volume in checks.
Yeah. I mean, so much going on, right? There's so many. We could stay on for hours, but we can't. No, don't worry. But but maybe there'll be a part two. But I think that let's talk about small businesses a little more in depth, right? Because I think this is also a fascinating topic for me. We are going to be also shameless plug alert. We're going to be publishing an article with payments on access to credit, right? Which we brought up earlier, because I do think that in turn, and I think whether it's an individual or a business, at the end of the day, it proves to be, sorry for this use, it used to be the disease of a lot of problems, right? That has to be cured. Yeah. And so I'm curious in your thoughts, because a few things you touched upon was, lack of access to credit. The one, I called the silver bullet, lack of a silver bullet approach here, right? Because there's so many different small businesses, and it's good to hear kind of like what Visa is doing there. But anything in specifically you want to like say, how do we target? I did another interview on this. It's like, how do you target a pizza shop versus a consulting agency versus a law firm versus who have different needs, but yet similar kind of things that they have to get done, right? Like, in terms of the day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, small business, that's probably its own, its own hour. But let me say a couple of things. I guess as we think about small businesses, we do something called a pulse survey. And we do them, a number of times during the year. You've probably seen them. We just published our latest and greatest. But we really measure like how small businesses are feeling, what's important to them. And they're often like a harbinger of, what's to come as it relates to like the macroeconomic environment and like how corporations will ultimately be feeling, CFOs and CEOs are feeling. And, one thing I will say is like small businesses are resilient, right? They're these folks are risk takers. Like they're the hardest working folks out there. I will say shameless plug, like we need to all make sure that we are conscious and support small
Yeah.
businesses. But to your point, small businesses can look and feel different, right? I think in general, they still feel fairly optimistic about the future. But as we mentioned, they're low on time. Like they don't have time. And in many cases, they don't have the financial acumen and that access to working capital. So that understanding of how do we set the right credit lines, how do we understand how to extend that credit, how do we identify small businesses that might be in your consumer card portfolio because many start using their personal card, and as they get bigger and grow, how can you identify those
Yeah.
small businesses and offer them, a small business card
Mm.
with many more feature functionality, much more feature functionality, a better
Yeah.
way to manage their cash flow, a better way to make payments and bill pay. So I think first it starts with like identifying, where those small businesses are in your book, or where those small businesses are to acquire.
Mhm.
And then as they grow, to your point, right, they need help navigating, accepting payments, making payments, managing cash flow. But as they get bigger, need to understand data and analytics better, right? They need to potentially, make cross-border payments. They have different needs. And so I think things like cash flow forecasting are really essential, because we know that, I think there's a stat out there that's like 4 out of 5 small businesses fail just
Yeah.
based on, not having the right cash flow forecasting tools and not understanding what and when they should pay out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so there's just so much, like it is an
Yeah.
onion to peel back. And we haven't even talked about, I mean, myself being a woman and underrepresented,
Yes. Yeah.
even harder,
Yeah.
for women and underrepresented small
Yeah.
businesses. Harder to get started, harder to get access to credit.
Yeah.
So, at Visa, I mean, we take a lot of that quite seriously. We do a lot from an advocacy perspective. We support National Small Business Week with the SBA. And
Mhm.
there are a lot of other really good entities out there as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've rambled a little bit, but there's so much to unpack
Yeah.
around small business. We haven't even talked about like security and
Yeah.
fraud and things like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. But I'll stop. I'll pause so that you can
No,
comment.
no. I mean, all of it, you're spot on. I can just summarize in my opinion, a few things. I agree. We need to find a way as an industry to help, expand access to credit beyond the traditional credit box, or get outside the box. Corny, but true. We have to figure that out, right? And it takes all of us, and that works with regulators. It's meaning us as banks. We have to figure out a way, because otherwise this is going to just make things worse, right? As we get into, another year of high interest rates, more inflation, whatever it might be. I think the second thing is that, we love payments, we live it, but it's not the only thing a small business needs. And I think that, those, and I give you a quick thing. I was at ADP, and I really got a sense of, understanding. We had our payroll cards, they were well received, but I used to be told, Anthony, they need 25 other things, right? So you can't be the center of attention, so but it was a humbling moment, but it also reminded you, right? Folks they need financing, so any education we can provide, which we should be doing alongside, and not just say, hey, here's a bank account. It should be more, here are other resources, here are tools, and I know visas provide a lot of that. We want to do the same, working together. How do we provide those tools to do that? And then, and then comes the end, is again, how do we get them to grow? Like, it's in our best interest to see them become, and I'll get into like a medium size, or hopefully like a really large, right? And some of
Yeah.
our clients, that we've seen that growth, which has been fantastic since the beginning of Cross River about 15 years ago, to now, is you have seen some folks succeed, right? Which is great, and get big. And what can we be doing to do that? So, and in saying that, as I made my little segue into, we're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum here, corporate wide. If we have a few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about some of the solutions. We talked, high level, but what do you think are the trends there, and what are kind of the hot products or solutions that you're seeing that corporates are really looking for these days?
Yeah. So I think so. On the large corporate side, we're seeing a ton of interest, and kind of plays into what you were talking about, but we're seeing a ton of interest in the middle market space. It's an area where we've been talking a lot about checks, but 64, I think it's something like 64% of middle market payments are still check based. And we estimate something like, I think it's like 50 billion of middle market business spend is on consumer. So again, like huge opportunity. It's an area where our financial institutions are really, thinking about, versus I think if you were to think 5-10 years ago, it was all about like going after the big travel books, right? That are the big multinational kind of corporate travel kind of books. Now I think that it looks very different. It's all about, working capital. So now, like never before, who knew that we would be talking about working capital 2 years ago? But now it is all about working capital, and how can you use cards to manage that working capital? I think, we talked about it earlier, CFOs and treasurers are getting younger, and they want that treasury innovation. There are many studies out there that talk about, the one thing that's on treasurers' mind these days is, again, their own tech modernization and that treasury innovation, and having a one-stop shop for all of their payments. And then what we see at Visa is a lot of interest in the verticals. It can be a way for our clients, whether you're a fintech or whether you're a financial institution, to acquire and differentiate if you're focused on, fleet fintech as an example, or construction or healthcare payments. And you can bring and deliver like a very unique value proposition with a very large TAM. And I think, partnerships with fintechs can be very key, here. So, there's a lot in the large corporate space, probably more for another time, but, those are just some of the things. I think if I were to say one word or maybe two words, it's working capital. It's really all about that working capital story.
I think, the needs, it's interesting because, there's a lot of similarities, right? As you think about a consumer, you think about commercial, but then it gets to the point where what is the major decision point, right? And I think it does go down to working capital. It comes down to, look, I have no time, no matter what it is. If you're at a corporate, you're busy, operating a large business. The thing you didn't want to do is, how do you save money? And sometimes, user experience comes second, right? Whereas, consumer side, in some cases, user experience drives, right? So I do think it's important, right, for those to understand, you have to understand kind of the audience you're speaking to. And if you are moving from consumer to commercial, you have to remember these things, that, you don't have to look the prettiest. You just have to do the most, right? Like the impact, right? And then the pretty can come later. You could fix it up later. A last question, and then, we talked a lot about different things, and by the way, for those playing bingo at home, we didn't say AI enough. So your answer has to include AI, probably.
We didn't say it at all. Yeah.
We didn't, I know. So we checked that box. Hopefully somebody got bingo, but I think, talk to me a little bit about, like, what do you see moving, like the future? It's like, I know it's hard to talk even the next year, but the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see the space? What in particular, what do you want to see, right? Maybe that's also the second half of the question.
Yeah. I think in the future, we'll have done a better job of solving the acceptance challenge. I do think that there are new innovations kind of on the forefront around, certainly Visa is thinking about it. We made some announcements recently, but how do you make it easy to take a virtual card payment for a supplier? And today that supplier may have to open, thousands of emails. It's not seamless. There's reconciliation issues. And so I think if we look out 5 to 10 years, we will have done a better job of that. And that will just naturally increase acceptance, which will naturally, get folks away from checks. I think in many cases, like, people continue to use checks because it's just a process that they know, and that it's they don't have to change anything. But when you make things easy and you make things seamless, and things go digital, it is a compelling reason for change. And so you talked about, you mentioned generative AI. I do think that if you think about all of the different ways in which generative AI is going to change, everything, whether it's, I even think about what we're doing at Visa. I look at it internally, right? Like, we all get thousands of emails. Well, with, some of the Microsoft tools, you can actually just type in, share with me like the 10 different PowerPoints that hit my inbox this last week, and, summarize those for me. Like, just the speed and productivity is huge. And then take that to like your sales teams, right? So if you could provide your sales teams with a way to pitch, and to do so very quickly, or to get information to share that back out with a client, that's huge. And then, if you think about all of the business applications, whether it's, how do I best pay and get paid, etc., fraud, all of that. I just think Gen AI is going to be a big deal. Sustainability is also, ESG is a big buzzword. I do think that like the corporate travel experience is going to continue to change, right? Just how we travel, why we travel. People are going to be thoughtful about that. And then supply chain diversity, if you think about even some of what we've seen during COVID, which the downstream of that is, a lot of folks have moved some of their suppliers offshore. So it's going to create demand for a better way to pay and get paid. So there's a lot there. I mean, I don't know what the future holds. I'd love to hear what you have to say, but it definitely will look a lot different and more digital.
I think so too. I mean, look, things take a little while, but I do think we're going to continue on this path. All of us in the industry are going to push hard. I think we're going to see checks, they're not going to go away, but I think they will be reduced significantly. Every year, we're seeing a percentage go higher and higher. I think eventually folks will do that. I do think too, look, AI wise, the power of AI across everything we do, right? I mean, they may do a better job of me moderating this, but I think it's in general, I do think, and all kidding aside, in terms of, I mentioned early credit decisioning, all these things, whatever we can do to help reduce, keep risk low, but give people more access to things, especially as you mentioned, women's business, minority businesses, whatever it is, we got to get those going because they are the lifeblood of this country, right? Pure and simple. Yeah. And so I think, and listen, to end that, and end this amazing conversation, by the way, I know we're running out of time, but I do think, look, I think the future is bright. I think this is a great space for those that are in it, and we're excited to be partners with Visa on this journey. Veronica, I can't thank you enough for this time today. Again, hope you have plenty of candy from your daughter, and for those that were listening, and thank you so much. For any questions, we can follow up with you. If you have any questions, let us know. But appreciate everyone's time today, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.